A few years ago, my friend and I ran a freelance business, and we would often have people reach out to us. However, this one time, this disturbing dude reached out and said, "Hey, I don't have much money to pay you, but what I can pay you in is hot women." Apart from the disturbing nature of that proposition, this, alongside numerous other experiences, has made me realize that people have absolutely no idea what it takes to do photography or videography. I will give quotes to people and they're like, "But aren't you just showing up for 2 hours?" And it's like, I'm on site for 2 hours. But there is so much more that goes into this industry. The first and most obvious expense of these is gear. For just a basic professional photographer, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in gear, let alone an extra $1,000 or more in insurance on top of that. Because it's not just one camera that you have. Often photographers will have more than one body because if you're photographing an event, you don't have time to wait and switch out lenses to capture a moment. You just need to be able to pick up the next camera and go. Or if one camera breaks, you have a second one sitting on the sideline so that you haven't been paid to come all this way out to this wedding and all of a sudden, sorry bride and groom, you're just not going to get your photos because this Canon crashed on me. And then the SD cards, which can cost like $1,000 on their own if you're getting the top end, and you've got lenses, which can be thousands and thousands of dollars each, and you can have like lights and tripods and everything else that comes in between that just adds up. So often, a lot of the time, you're not just paying for someone to be there, you're also paying for all the equipment that comes with them. The first time I realized this, I was at a film boot camp as a kid, and they said this very simple piece of film equipment, which you think you could just pick up at Bunnings for like $100. They're like, yeah, that's $200,000. And sometimes I'm sure there's elements of inflation there, but sometimes it is justified because the mechanics needed to produce this sort of quality of glass where there is no fault is extremely difficult. That's why you never buy anything full price, because on sale it can often come down quite a bit. Don't let me forget subscription costs. The costs of things like music licensing, like stock footage, or things like Dropbox for storage. All of these things add up, and this can be just thousands of dollars a year on its own. So if you're not getting work, these costs are still coming in. I think the main problem here is with photography, which I haven't had with videography gigs. There's this perception that, oh, I can just get my nephew to do it for $50. Because they just assume taking a photo, all you need to do is just click. When in reality, of course, that is absolutely not the case. Where with video, there's a different perception there. There isn't this thought that anyone can just do it because they can't do it themselves. With photos, people have this false confidence that it's something that is really, really easy to do. Hence why they expect you to do it for like $50 like their nephew, rather than the hundreds or thousands of dollars that it can take in workload. At one point years ago, I was talking to some magician friends and they were chatting to someone else in the circle and they were being asked, how much do you charge for a gig? And there was something like, $2,500 for a half day. And on the surface, that sounds crazy. $2,500 for a half, what, $5,000 a day? But that's not what it is, right? They may only get 3 gigs a week. And you're not just paying for their time, you're paying for their 10 years of experience of learning how to entertain a crowd, how to engage an audience. And also, generally, the people hiring, they're not kids' birthday parties. These are big corporate events. So you need someone good, you need someone who can deliver. And if you can bring someone who can deliver that entertainment value, they're worth far more than that $2,500. So there also needs to be a perception of it's not just hours on site. You're not just clocking into an entry-level job. You've got this 10 years of experience of engaging an audience, delivering far more than $2,500 in value that needs to be accounted for. And the same goes for photography. I mean, I've been doing this for so many years, whether it be as a hobbyist or then moving into the professional level, that time develops a sense of skill and a sense of perspective that you can't get just picking up your camera for the first time. Or the amount of times I've been asked, oh, what photo studio did you take this in? And I'm like, that was just their white wall in their living room with like blue tack on the back of it that I had to edit out. And it was a dodgy little ring light that didn't quite work and this other sort of dodgy thing on the side. But you get good at making the most out of a terrible situation, and that's what you're paying for in the skills. The one thing that I would agree with, which I think will change over time, is the editing. There's always this perception that photographers just click a button, right? That's all you need to do. You just take the camera and go, boop, done. Which, I mean, one of my friends does because he's not paid enough to edit. He's paid bottom dollar and he's like, I will take JPEGs and I will send you those JPEGs. And absolutely fair enough. If you're only paying $150 to get a photographer, that's what you're gonna get. But on the back end, there's new AI editing softwares which are coming out which try and learn your editing style. And hopefully over time, they're not there yet, but give it a couple of years and you should just be able to put your wedding photos in, your event photos in, and boom, one click, give it a minute, and all of a sudden all these photos are culled, all these photos are edited, and then it will have required near zero work on the back end as opposed to now sitting behind for hours and hours and hours and hours. And this will just apply to those simple events, but if you want proper artistic creative stuff, obviously there will still be manual editing involved in that. Some photographers as well will have studio spaces that they have to rent. And once again, this is another one of those expenses that just keeps going regardless of how much business you're coming in. And I think you really have to think about it as a business. This isn't someone just clocking in, clocking out. They get their wages, they get their super. You have fixed expenses, and you are hoping that you can overcome these fixed expenses and bring enough people in that your business can survive, and your business is you as a sole trader, as a freelancer. You know, you don't have that guaranteed, oh, I got $300 working today. Nothing is guaranteed. The customer is effectively paying for marketing time, the front-end contractual negotiations and paperwork, and then the editing and revisions and everything else that goes into that. You're not paying for the time on site. You're paying for the entire business operation. And just because you don't see that work, it doesn't mean it's not there, and that's what is included into that price. You're not paying for these 16 photos that are delivered, you're paying for the entire process that went into these 16 photos. I mean, the longest job I did, it was also the highest paying job I did, but the longest job I did took something like 6 months, if not longer. But it's because there were so many revisions over and over and again, and rightfully so, because it was extremely important to get right. But it needed that work, and hence why we had to charge so much, because it took so much time. So you can't just say, oh, it's just a couple of minute video, it's this much. Because some projects just take significantly more work than you could have ever expected. But I have found though, the clients that pay the most tend to be the easiest to deal with. Because you tend to be reaching a group of people who aren't there just to get the cheapest job and get the most out of you. They're there because they need a quality product. And they're coming to you because they know you can deliver that quality product. So they're not going to be fighting over these tiny little details, trying to get the most out of you. They're like, sweet, we want you to do this. Sweet, you did it. Give it to us. Nice, moving on. And sometimes as well, you're paying for other employees, right? Not just me. You might have a makeup artist that's on site to glam you up. You might have a second shooter that's getting extra angles that, one person can't get on their own. And this is all extra costs that go into this entire process. I think the problem with doing photography work in Sydney, and I'm sure many other places in the world, is that most of them are poverty wages. They're like shooting nightclubs and things like this, where they are effectively paying you below minimum wage once you account for all of the expenses that I have mentioned. And the amount of things you're offered, and you're like, I guess the thing is that the people who take them are young people who are just getting started in the space and just want to get paid to go clubbing. And I mean, fair enough if that's you, but don't expect to be getting the top quality people if you're only paying $150 for 4 hours on site. Like, it's just not going to happen. And sometimes I'll find myself kind of being contradicted because there's some work that I'd be willing to do for free, that I'd be willing to do for less, just because I will enjoy it. I want to be there. I want to add that to my portfolio, my experience, whatever that may be. But I feel like I'm compromising the industry because then you're creating in these clients' minds this expectation of workload for not the right rates. Back once again, when I was doing magic, I remember someone ranting out on our Facebook page because he had been offered this gig to work at a pub or something. And some kid had basically undercut him by 4 times the amount. And the person was like, well, can you do it for the same number? And the guy's like, well, obviously not, because no one can do it for that number unless there's some teenager who doesn't have to pay for rent. So it was always this sort of conflict of how do you maybe get these cool opportunities that you would be willing to do for less sometimes, but also not compromise the integrity of the space. The amount of times I've done jobs and people come up to being like, you're going to get a lot of work after this, right? Jobs are going to be coming in left or right. I've never gotten a job from one of those. And they'll try and use that as a means of exploitation by saying, you'll get so much work out of this, that's why you should do this one on poverty rates. And it's like, no, fuck off. The reason this gear costs so much is because it's better. The reason I switched to the current camera that I'm using now, the Sony a7 IV from the Canon 80D, was because I began to miss too many moments. The low light capabilities of the 80D just weren't keeping up with what I needed. When I was trying to take photos of fast moving objects, it wasn't able to keep up with the autofocus. And that means if you're trying to complete a job, you can't afford 80% of your photos to be duds before you even get a chance to see whether they're composed properly or not. Hence the need to buy these really overly expensive cameras and lenses. Like, for example, these photos right here in my magazine that's coming out soon, they would not have been able to be taken with the 80D. In a dimly lit bar, it would just not have happened. But because of the new camera, the new lens, and some nice new software on Lightroom, it's perfect, it's beautiful. An interesting add-on is a thing about perceptions, right? There's a sort of client perception that if they're paying a lot of money, they want someone who brings quality. But there is that psychological thing of bigger means better, which is odd because in the camera world, right, my Sony is significantly smaller than my older 80D, yet the Sony is significantly better. So sometimes you're having to explain to clients that actually, no, this is the top of the range, or sometimes people will just add extra bits onto their camera, extra sections that they can attach stuff to just to make it look bigger and make it look more important, make it look better. Because perceptions is everything, right? If you're talking about the top echelon of photographers and how much they're able to charge and things below that, the quality of photography is nearly the same, yet they're able to charge significantly more just because of these perceptions. Whether it's the experience they're able to induce while photographing with them, whether it's the brand and the name, whether it's just how they look and like everything about it. Branding is everything. That's why I've had such a focus of trying to build out my website to make it look as professional as possible, have the highest echelon of photos as possible. Because if someone goes on and sees a couple of nice LinkedIn headshots, they're like, cool, okay, I guess. But if they see a photo of Jack Black, if they see a photo of Margot Robbie, all of a sudden you're not just a professional photographer, you're the best of the best, you're elite. Because to be able to photograph those people, you must be of a certain standard. And hence, you're able to get more access, get more opportunities, and charge significantly more than those poverty nightclub rates. And the cost isn't just about taking good photos. It's about making sure that the client has a good time, has a good experience. And that is the focus. I have rarely gotten a job that I've applied for. Very, very few jobs I've applied for I've gotten, and that's mainly because I'm reaching very high with those. But the jobs I've come back to, the forwards that I've received, are because I delivered a high quality product that they were happy with, and I made sure that they enjoyed the time that they had with me. They had fun, they were learning, whatever it may be. But it is creating this experience with all this absurdly expensive gear, software, the time it takes, beforehand, client relations, during, afterwards, revisions. This is why this job is significantly harder and more expensive than people think. It isn't just clicking a button, going home and sending off the photos. There is so much more that goes into this that people don't even realize. So before you question next time why it costs so much, now you have a better idea of the workload that goes into it, or the unseen, behind the scenes time, energy has gone into producing the work that you are trying to obtain.